Starting, and we're live. Well, hi everyone. Just wanted to thank Sheldon Solomon, one of my idols, to join us today. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And well, if any of you are interested, I posted a link here with Sheldon's book. We're going to talk about it. Just wanted to leave here, and and more towards the end of the chat. I'm going to be posting it again, so anyone that is interested can get to it straight away. Now, if you guys can tell us where you're from, that would be nice, just for you to have an idea of who's here. Let me just take a look. Okay, Zachary, Marie, welcome. Now, and please, you're more than welcome to send your questions, all right? So, Sheldon, I just wanted to have you tell us about your story. How did you, I know I have a very interesting story about how you came out to question the whole, death and everything, how that took you to where you are today. So,
well, thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm basically an egghead experimental social psychologist, and for decades, well, going on 40 years, my buddies Jeff Greenberg and Tom Pazinski and I have been studying how the uniquely human awareness of death influences just about everything that people do, whether we're aware of it or not. And a lot of times people say to me, well, how did you get interested in all of these things? And turns out that I've been kind of preoccupied with death really pretty much since I was a little kid. I know you've heard my tale before, but I remember being 8 years old and my mother telling me, oh, you got to say goodbye to your grandmother because she's not going to be around much longer. And my grandmother was fatally ill with cancer at the time, and so she died the next day. And I remember sitting around, and I was sad, but not overly perturbed in retrospect. But I collected stamps at the time, and I was just sitting there looking at my stamp collection, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to miss my grandma, and that's pretty bad, but that means my mom's going to get old, and then she's not going to be around forever. And then I'm looking at my stamp collection, and I had old American stamps with all these dead presidents. And I'm like, oh, there's George Washington, he's dead. There's Thomas Jefferson, he's dead. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, all these presidents are dead. My grandmother's dead. My mom's going to be dead. Oh, crap. That means that there'll come a time when I will be no more also. And it was quite an existential blow. I remember being, literally it made my hair stand up. And, then I didn't think about it much for a lot of years. And then I became a professor, and my training's in social psychology, and I did some interesting work on stress reduction in graduate school. But to make a short story long, I got to my job here at Skidmore College, and quite by accident, I was walking around in the library and I saw some books, and the titles I found very arresting. One was called The Birth and Death of Meaning, and another was called The Denial of Death, and a third book was called Escape from Evil, all by a cultural anthropologist named Ernest Becker. And Becker died in 1974, a couple of weeks, ironically and sadly, before he won a Pulitzer Prize for his book, The Denial of Death. And what Becker said basically is that, people in some ways are the same as all other living creatures in that we're biologically constructed to survive and for self-preservation and reproductive purposes. But he also said, yeah, but we're unique. No other creature, as far as we can tell, has this big, massive brain that allows us to literally, think of things that don't even yet exist and then make those things real. And we're also able to they call it mental time travel these days, that you can sit right now where you are and I can sit where I am, And I can imagine what it'd be like to be back in the days of the dinosaur, or imagine right now what it'd be like to be tap dancing on the Great Wall of China. And all of those things are, incredibly uplifting, including the fact that we're so smart that we all know that we're here. And what Becker points out is that it's exhilarating to be alive and to know it. And that's like awesome. And we should really savor that moment. But it's also devastating, because unless you're a baby or mentally impaired, if you're smart enough to know that you're here, you're also smart enough to know that you will someday die. And more than that, you know that you can die at any time for reasons that you could never anticipate or control. And you know that you're an animal, like it or not, a breathing piece of defecating meat that's no more significant or enduring than a cockroach or a cucumber. And what Becker argued is that if that's all we thought about every day, you wouldn't be able to stand up in the morning. And you just literally be a pulsating piece of biological protoplasm just cowering under your bed. And what he argues is that the way that we manage this potentially debilitating existential terror is by embracing what he called cultural worldviews, just beliefs about reality that we share with our fellow humans, that give us a sense that life has meaning and that we have value.
Can I just say something, because it's really
Please.
interesting. I was reading this book called *Sapiens*.
Yes.
So it's amazing, because what they're thought about is that for human beings to organize in groups larger than, let's say, like 25, or maybe I think it was 50 people, you cannot do that unless you have the capacity to expose ideas, to think abstractly, and then you create something that people will follow, and that is not only one leader, and that's how you do it. So
yes, no, it's quite remarkable, because it turns out that that's what most of the evolutionary types think today, is that our big brains didn't develop necessarily because we needed to be intelligent. It developed as a way to manage our social interactions so that we just wouldn't be kicking the crap out of each other all day. And that's why, in primate communities, you never get more than, a couple of hundred. In fact, that's kind of large, I'm told. And that's because there needs to be a clearly defined dominance hierarchy where you know who can beat the crap out of who. But we've solved that problem symbolically by just generating views of the world that kind of give us each a sense of where we belong in the cosmos.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, because of course I was, as I was reading it, I was thinking about what you says, and what Ernest Beckett says, and it was like, it makes perfect sense. I mean, but the thing is the same ideas that create the social glue to maintain a larger group can also end up tipping us to like totalitarianism, and hey Josh, welcome. Just saying hi to Josh, just popped in. So
very
please,
good, welcome.
And just want to remind you guys that any questions you have to Sheldon, please let us know. So sorry, Sheldon, as you were saying.
Well, no, to get back to your point, or back to both points. So, Becker's saying, okay, we create essentially culture, beliefs about reality that give us a sense that life has meaning and that we have value. And this is a good thing for the most part, because we just need to feel that way. But what Becker also points out, mostly in his book Escape from Evil, is that this also creates tremendous difficulties. And his main point is that we have problems whenever we run into people who don't share our beliefs about reality. If we think about back in the day when there weren't many people on Earth, and when different groups were probably isolated, geographically, you probably didn't bump into many people who didn't share your views of the world. But when populations grew and we started to intermingle, according to Becker, this creates a psychological conundrum of sorts. Because if you believe God created the earth in 6 days and, before taking a well-deserved break, and then you run into somebody, let's say from the Borneo in the South Pacific, they believe that the earth was created from a coconut on the side of a giant palm tree. Well, if you accept the validity of somebody else's view of the world, it undermines the confidence that you have in your own. And when that happens, you expose yourself to the very anxiety that your beliefs were designed to reduce.
And not only that, I mean, depending on in which point of your life it happens, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while. Is that depending on the point in life that this sort of conflict happens, you can either feel very stupid and therefore you avoid it like hell. I mean, because you could be subscribing yourself to something that is just made up belief. And you feel stupid. So you double down on your beliefs, right?
Very good. So that's right. So when we feel that our beliefs are being threatened, that's when you think that you might be wrong, or when someone in a position of power or authority declares your beliefs to be childish or false, that creates tremendous problems. And
just acknowledging Josh saying that, so ego is the problem. Yeah, most of the times ego is the problem, right?
Well, Josh, I think that's a good point. I like how Nietzsche, the German philosopher, put it in the Gay Science book, where he says consciousness is the most calamitous stupidity by which we shall someday perish. It's not a happy thought, but Josh is really right, because what Becker says is that when we feel threatened, we lash out to defend our beliefs. We belittle people who are different, and we try to convince them to drop their beliefs and accept ours instead. And if that doesn't work, we just kill them to prove that our ideas are right after all. And in this Escape from Evil book, Becker, he just says that ironically, the main cause of evil in the world is when people self-righteously declare that they're going to rid the world of evil. How many crusades and genocides have been done, in this kind of self-righteous state of indignation, where you're going to prove that you're right by exterminating the infidels.
And how much evil have people perpetrated in order to rid the world of evil, right?
That's right.
So, okay, so you got in contact with Becker's work, and that just flipped your mind, I believe.
That's right.
You even told me that it took a little while for you to for everything to sink in, and but then just wanted to tell us first of all, and how did you go from there to this latest book, and and actually. Theory management theory. How is that? Is that an evolution of what Ernest is doing? How can you compare these two? Okay.
Well, so we read these books and we're like, oh, this is great. We think people should hear about these ideas. I thought they were so provocative that, like I told you when we spoke last, I quit my job as a professor. And I wandered around for a few years, and I was like a cook, and I did construction work, and met a lot of great people. But I was like, oh, I got to think about this. And then I came back, and I'm being a professor again. And I would go around and talk about, I'd be like, here's what Becker says. And frankly, what most professors said is, well, that's just bullshit. He's just, these are interesting ideas, but there's no proof for any of them. And moreover, it would be impossible to prove them. So what Jeff and Tom and I did, and what we've been doing, for almost 40 years now, is we developed a variety of experimental paradigms to see whether these ideas have merit. And the one that we've done the most work in is very, very simple. We just remind people of the fact that they're going to die someday. You know, sometimes we have them fill out a little questionnaire where we just say, hey, write down your thoughts and feelings about your own death. And sometimes we go outside the lab and we interview people either in front of a funeral parlor or 100 meters to either side, thinking that if we stop you in front of the funeral parlor, that death is going to be on your mind. Other times it's even more devious. We bring people into the lab and we have them read stuff on a computer. And while they're doing that, we flash the word death so fast, 28 milliseconds, that you can't even see it. And what we thought is, well, if Becker's right, then when you're reminded of your own death, that should make you embrace your culturally constructed beliefs. And we should be able to detect that by measuring your reactions to other people who either share your beliefs or who have different beliefs. And so all we thought is that whenever you're reminded of your own death, you should like people more if they share your beliefs, and you should hate them and even kill them if they're opposed to your beliefs or just have different ones. And
can I just ask you one thing? How does that apply to terminal patients?
oh, good point. Don't know, and that's actually what we're studying now.
Really? I'm
yeah.
good, aren't I?
No, that we're working in hospice settings.
Wow.
There was a guy named Eric Erickson, and he wrote a book called The 8 Stages of Man. And the last stage, of course, is right when you're old, right before you die. And Erickson made a distinction between what he called despair and ego integrity. And he said some people, when they're terminally ill, or even when they're just very old, they get incredibly bitter, angry, and fearful. They're like, life has no meaning. You know, this is bullshit. I'm not going to be here anymore. And it's really not a pretty picture. On the other hand, there are other folks that as they get older, they're like, look, no, life has never been more meaningful. And if you ask them, well, you know, what do you think about the fact that you're going to die soon? They're like, well, of course I'm apprehensive about that. You know, I can't really practice unless you drink too much over the weekend, I guess, and pass out. But, you know, no one's ever come back to tell us what it's actually like. But they're like, well, yeah, but I accept my mortality as a perfectly reasonable price to pay for the privilege of being alive. And so I don't know what we'll find in this work, but and my wife Maureen is a therapist, and she works as a bereavement counselor in our local hospice. And the hospice people always talk about when you're terminally ill that it's a psychological fork in the road, and it can kind of go either way. For some of us, it brings out the best in us. Other people, not so good.
And you still don't know what kind of characteristics or psychological characteristics could
That's correct.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's it, because and not only that, I mean, and it might be also hard to differentiate between the fuck it, I'm not gonna be here anymore, and the rage that, you know, this kind of behavior when you confronted with death that you mentioned. I mean, because some people just, you know, they just become more cynical, let's say.
That's right.
Not necessarily enraged and, you know.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's a good way to put it. Some people become enraged. Some people become cynical. Other people, Kierkegaard said that when they're really fearful, that they're tranquilized by the trivial. You know, they spend their time, you know, watching television to see who could drink the most yak urine on Survivor, or they're, you know, at the department store trying to buy a chainsaw and a lemon and so on. And all of these psychological devices, according to Becker, are just non-optimal reactions to the fact that we'll someday die.
And even take into consideration the fact that, I mean, we all agree that talking about our own death, I mean, talking about death is uncomfortable enough. Talking about our own mortality is like, please, can we talk about something else? You know, what's on TV? So But I mean, from 74 to now, what has changed in people's minds? I mean, our generation, are the newer generations more open to talk about this? Is the internet playing a part in this? I mean, how do you see your work being, the reception of this kind of work within people of different ages, for instance?
Okay, you asked like 12 good questions, which is great. I think
because I'm not going to have 12 good answers. So.
No, I don't know about that, but these are all, I think, incredibly important questions. I think things have changed, and I think the internet is a game changer. I mean, here we are. Last time we were together, it was in a small hotel room, I think, in New York City, and now you're in Brazil, and I'm in upstate New York. It's remarkable, and I think potentially liberating to have a technology like this where people literally all over the planet are able to communicate with each other directly. But also incredibly threatening, because if you think about it for a moment, the internet is the ultimate turd in the cultural punch bowl, because it makes people, whether we want to or not, very much aware of the fact that your own particular view of the world is not the only one. And, back to Nietzsche for a moment, because he saw all this coming. In the gay science, Nietzsche has that famous phrase that God is dead. And a lot of people, I don't remember if we talked about this in New York, and it doesn't really matter, but, a lot of people have heard that God is dead. But you got to go back and read the rest of the paragraph where Nietzsche says that, because basically his point was that, in the late 1800s, everything was changing. You had the theory of evolution, you had the Industrial Revolution, had the beginning of modernity. And Nietzsche's point was that all of these cultural constructions, pretty much the Judeo-Christian worldview, that had given people a sense of meaning and value for thousands of years, was about to be shattered by modernity. And in many ways, although atheism is certainly not a new phenomenon, there were cynics, skeptics, atheists back in the pre-Socratic Greek philosophers. So that line of thought, which is just a very naturalistic, I don't have any need to take recourse in supernatural beliefs, I'm just going to accept the world as I encounter it. Well, that's been here forever, sitting side by side with more traditional religious conceptions. But the Kierkegaards, the Nietzsches, the Sartres, Albert Camus of the world that have given us the kind of contemporary atheistic / agnostic counterpoint to traditional religious worldviews, I think those have come to fruition in recent years, even though, as you know, probably more than I, that there's still ardent resistance to people who declare to be atheist or agnostic. More and more people are beginning to adhere to that view of the world, and you're less likely to be stoned to death or burned at the stake, thankfully, if you proclaim that to be a core belief. And I think one of the things that has happened in recent years is that the internet has been a remarkably productive and potentially liberating platform for people all over the world to realize that they're not the only ones that harbor these beliefs that used to be just dismissed as a lunatic fringe. But as we were talking about before we started the live conversation, have become more and more common, even in cultures where you would think it inconceivable a few years ago.
Just wanted to show you here, I just have a visitor. Come here. My little son here. I just found out that I have a son, because until last week I thought I had a daughter. True.
Well,
My
we went
sister loves.
around. We have a kitten that we thought was a male, and so it turns out not.
So, and it was hard for me to acknowledge that, but anyway, but now it's okay. We're just working our way around it. But I just wanted to address something that you said that I find it really interesting. Because when you said that atheism as a phenomenon, and I find it so interesting because, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge that Josh said he's in Seattle and he loves meeting us here. So
Excellent.
it's mutual.
Yes,
Thank you, Josh.
I love Seattle.
And well, and the thing is, I mean, when we say that atheism as a phenomenon, that actually it started as, let's say, an institution because it had some argumentation to back it off. I mean, with Nietzsche and some great philosophers and everything. But the fact is that we're all born atheists, right? I mean, every baby is an atheist. So don't you find it weird that, I mean, it's actually the other way around, that atheism is the natural way? If someone is born in a deserted island and spends his or her, I mean, life in there, they'll never know about God. I mean, here we are at this point in history, in 21st century, and atheism is still considered a phenomenon or something that is disruptive, when it's actually the other way around. I mean, it's the simplest thing ever.
Yeah, maybe, but it's simple and yet and yet dauntingly difficult, because on the one hand, babies are born devoid of religious beliefs per se. On the other hand, there's a lot of the evolutionary psychology types. There's a very able Professor Paul Bloom at Yale, and he argues that that we come into the world with a set of cognitive propensities that make it very likely that we're going to gravitate towards religious beliefs. And it's a long story and it's kind of complex, but the argument is based on the idea that human beings are naturally inclined to attribute meaning and purpose to everything.
Exactly, I agree, but just to make it parent, I don't mean to interrupt your thought, but I agree with that. But wouldn't a way to see this as being like religion or other cults or spiritual or supernatural kind of explanations actually represent the first attempts of human being to explain things, which can also be I mean, the distant cousin of science. I mean, so the same wiring that we have that eventually took us to our worshiping and religious inclinations. Now that we have science, I mean, it's just out of curiosity. I mean, because lightning struck this guy. He was hiding in a tree during the rain. People didn't know what the fuck was going on. So, he must have done something to deserve that. Of course, I mean, we're just trying to explain, because something happened, right? Wouldn't you say? I mean, we were talking about like the same thing. Like curiosity ends up. If curiosity ends up being turned into this road to religion.
Yeah. All right. Well, a good point. I think that's where the death anxiety angle comes in. What we would argue, along with a lot of other folks, is that it's quite understandable how this inclination to interpret things and ascribe meaning ends up making us profoundly religious. I think I'm losing you. Can you hear me on your end?
No, I can. I'm just gonna turn off the light here because it's getting dark in here.
Okay.
Hold on. Keep talking. I'm listening.
All right. So I think I forgot what I was saying. My neural net went down. All right. So I think you make a good point, which is that You might argue that it would be quite understandable in the early days how religious beliefs would arise. A rock falls on somebody's head. Oh, somebody must have been pissed. Or, the wind's blowing through the trees. That's a spirit of a dead ancestor. And this in no way is to imply that religious beliefs are stupid or that the people who embrace them were cognitively deficient. On the other hand, it does raise the question of why it is now that we have developed demonstrably superior ways in the form of science to address certain questions that pertain to physical reality, why we're reluctant to abandon, fundamentally religious worldviews. And, here's where I guess we come in with the death anxiety angle. As far as we can tell, the best way to deal with death anxiety is to not die. And, religions, there's so many different ones, past and present, but what almost all of them has in common is the promise of literal immortality in some form to people who behave.
Explaining the origin of life and explaining what happens after you die, right?
That's correct. And doing so in a way that's comforting. I mean, there are secular views of the origin of life and what happens to us after we die that essentially suggest that you're really an ephemeral piece of biological protoplasm that's born in a time and place not of your choosing, who inhabits the earth for an infinitesimally small amount of time before ignominiously degenerating into a pile of mulch.
And be grateful for it.
And there you go.
Right?
That's not as appealing as the idea that you'll be, in some form of heaven or reincarnation or an afterlife. And our view and our research suggests that, that is a primary psychological impetus for embracing religious worldviews. And I guess my view, and people of goodwill could disagree about this, but yeah, I'm kind of the persuasion that it's time for the human race to grow up, as it were. We're a young form of life, and the culturally constructed religious beliefs have served us well, but they may have brought us as far as we can get without rendering us the first form of life to be responsible for our own extinction. And I think we may have gotten to the point where it's time to really consciously and collectively consider, well, what next? The idea that people need to perceive that life has meaning and that they have value, I don't think that's going to go away. As self-conscious creatures, we're basically meaning-making, significance-seeking entities. And so I think the challenge for, the people in the world to come is going to be, I'll call it a post-religious universe, for lack of a better way to describe it. But I think that the challenge is going to be for the agnostics and the atheists of the world, and I include myself amongst them, is like, well, all right, is it possible to live a fulfilling and meaningful life without subscribing to traditional religious beliefs? And for me, the answer is unequivocally yes. And remember, we were chatting before we got on live. I wrote it down because I want to see the book, The Grace Without God, book that you refer to. I think there's a lot of thoughtful people on the planet that describe themselves as atheists and agnostics that are not cavalierly denouncing The aspects of life that religious beliefs serve, they're just saying, well, I think we can do just as well, if not better.
Yeah, and it has all to do with breaking the monopoly that religion has claimed over certain things,
That's
right?
right.
Not only morality and goodness, but also spirituality. I mean, even though semantically speaking, I don't like the word spirituality because it implies a spirit, but we all know what we're talking about.
That's
It's
right.
like states of mind and of being where you feel like transcendent or whatever. You don't need religion to get there anyway, you know. So I just wanted to, because we're reaching the end of the chat. I just wanted to ask you something because I was really amazed by one of the interviews that we did. um, it wasn't even planned, this interview. I was supposed to interview David Smalley in Texas,
Right.
but he couldn't do it that. But at the time, he had like he was on medication for a toothache or something like that, so he had to rest. But he said, but you should interview my wife, Brandy, which we did, and it was amazing because first of all, I mean, there are two aspects of it that I found really intriguing. First is that she was she was born in not a religious family, but a family with religious values. So
Right.
it's not like they were really into it, but they, you know, religion was a part of her household, even though it was really not that present and everything. And but she said that, and well, as you're listening to her speak, we say, okay, so then she started dating him, and then he turned her into an atheist. But it was what was surprising was to hear her say that actually she just after she started dating him, she found out that she was always an atheist. She
Nice.
just didn't know it was possible, and that's why. And this is one of the times where we make this analogy with the gay movement, because well, if you live in a small town, a small city where nobody talks about it, you think you're a freak,
That's right.
right? So I just wanted to ask you, what kind of psychological effect can this situation have in a person that for so long thinks that, you know, they're damaged or there's something wrong with me, and then you get to a point where you found out, no, hold on. I mean, and we were talking about the internet. I mean, one of the good things about
Right.
internet is like you find out you're not by yourself, you're not alone. But I mean, this is quite recent. And not only that, and on top of that, what happened was her family just broke relations with her. You
Well,
know, so what, this is the only thing that can stay between a father and a daughter, something that we wired to do, like genetically wired to put our children, I mean, above us, to give our lives for them, and then something comes along, and I can't think of anything else other than religion that would make a father turn his back, or a mother turn her back on a child. So these two situations happening with the same person. I mean, what do you read out of it?
well, just like you said, and actually that was a great analysis. I think there's a lot of us who grow up surrounded by ideas that we accept long before we're capable of consciously questioning them. And it is ultimately traumatic to accept beliefs under psychological duress. We call it socialization, and we all do it. But for those of us who realize that we are different sexually, religiously, politically, than the mainstream community that surrounds us, yeah, it could be devastating to subordinate your own inclinations to culturally constructed norms. On the other hand, this gets back to the liberating aspects. Once you realize that you've had these beliefs and you've had them for quite some time, and once you realize that you're not the only pilgrim on the planet, who harbors those ideals, I think that's the first step to not to overstate the case or sound hysterical or histrionic. Yeah, but I think that's the gateway to liberation, is to declare confident ownership of one's beliefs, again, fortified and empowered by the recognition that you're not the only one, and that you're really at the vanguard of what I suspect will be a harbinger of things to come.
And speaking of the devil, Josh just jumped in and said, is there any point in telling my all religious family that I'm an atheist? I want to stand up for myself, but overall, isn't there more risk in losing connection with them than what would be gained by telling them? What do you think?
Yeah, Josh, again, I wish we were all in the same room, because this is great to have you as part of the mix. And I can't answer that question except to say, wow, that's the $10,000 question, because you've really captured it. It is important to maintain connections with one's family, and there is a real risk of losing that by a declaration of one's beliefs. And this is a tough one. In an ideal universe, and this may sound like a Walt Disney film, but maybe there'll come a moment where you're able to have it both ways. And I don't know what that moment might be, but sometimes you just get an opening. You know, it may be a casual comment, you're watching television or having a discussion in a holiday situation, where you realize that somebody else in the family, you say that they're all religious, but maybe there's somebody else that has the same gnawing doubts that you do, but just has been unable or unwilling to express it. And so, don't know.
This reminds me when I started smoking pot. And whenever I would get together with my cousins, it was like maybe this one. I mean, you never knew which one could you open up to.
There you go. And it turned out that it was my cousin who I never thought would be.
Yeah. Well, nowadays it's all of them. Eventually, but you know, but it's true. I mean, you just have to figure out where you're stepping on. You know, and that's. I mean, careful. Just be careful. Just know. Don't do anything. I mean, out of like a rush or anything to get things out in the open. If you feel like you might lose something. It's tough. It's tough. It's a shame actually that it has to be tough. But just remember, if I might say something, just remember that gay people are overcoming this. I mean, not so good for us, because what we heard from many people was that it was easier for them to come out as gay than as atheists. So, well, at least it's not really that bad nowadays to come out as a gay person. So now that we're starting to follow on their footsteps on the gay movement with the openly secular campaign, you know, encouraging people to come out of the closet and making, I mean, just
that's right,
forcing people to realize that we're not these monsters. So maybe we're on the road to something better. So Josh just said the interesting point. Thank you for that input. You're totally right about the weed too, Michael. Well,
that's right, Michael.
weed always bringing people together. But yeah, I'll try to let it just be a natural progression to you to unity with them. Yeah.
Very good, Josh.
Well, Sheldon, thank you so much for this. It's always a pleasure. I hope we can see each other again next August when I'm shooting.
I hope so too.
And I hope we can do something about it. What we were talking about beforehand. Josh, thank you for your input. Marie, Zachary, I don't know who else is here. But anyway, hope to see you guys next time. And Sheldon, you were always welcome as well. It was a pleasure. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, thanks everybody. It was a great day.
Great. All right, my friend. Take care.
I know.
Bye-bye.